validation. It feels great to feel seen, supported, and appreciated. And, you know, set in the right context, it's also something that can make us feel like we have found our people and our home. It can also be something that is used in place of compensation in places, especially in the flow arts. And today I want to talk a little bit about that and why it might be a negative thing. Drex here from Drex Factor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain. And today I want to talk about something that is part of flow arts culture that I think we should maybe put under a bit of a lens. But before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Fire Mecca, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Juggling Calling, Pyroterra Light Toys, Spinballs, and Ultrapoi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all of these awesome companies and the work that they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I have down in the description of this video. And special thanks to the non-business friends of the channel, Lain Mochinsky and Pekha Pekkonen. Thank you both so much for supporting my channel, my work, and my mission. Oh my goodness, so it has been bitterly cold in DC for most of the past week with really high winds and wind chills that are well below freezing. This is the first warm day we've had in some time, so I hope you don't mind if I do a little bit of walking as I talk with you about this topic. So I've had the idea for this video rolling around in my head now for months, and with a lot of flow festivals now releasing their teaching lineups, I thought it might be a good opportunity to dive into this topic because I actually think that it's kind of an important one. So I'm going to start this off by telling a story. I remember many years ago being at a flow festival that I will not name and watching their gala performance and leaving it just kind of feeling not just uninspired, but kind of angry. Like, it was one of those things that in sitting through all of these performances, I overwhelmingly got the feeling that the people performing in the gala were not there to inspire me or show me interesting new things, but that it was my job as an audience member to make them feel good about the fact that they got up on stage. And I found, much to my great disappointment, that that experience wasn't terribly unique, either that year or at that or other festivals. And not just that, it was being reflected in several other aspects of the festivals too. One of the other ways I saw this manifesting was in the teaching lineups at a lot of festivals. You know, I remember going to my first fire festival back in, 2009, and being absolutely blown away by the wide variety of international talent that they'd brought out for the event to teach. And a lot of lineups I've seen lately just aren't nearly as inspiring. And not just that, it became clear as time went on that the vast majority of people that were making up these teaching lineups weren't getting paid to do so. Sometimes they were getting a comp ticket to come in, but other than that, they were essentially paying to teach at these events. I myself would frequently find that I would lose money going to events to teach, and I was actually getting travel stipends. I can't imagine how much money people were losing who weren't getting travel stipends at all. And I began to wonder, how did it make sense for people to do this? After pondering this for months, I came to an inescapable conclusion: that the compensation that people were looking for to teach at festivals wasn't monetary. So what could it be instead? And then it hit me, and it hit me so hard I felt the need to write it down on my whiteboard in my home office. The currency of the flow arts had switched from being actual currency to being attention. Last year I had a conversation on this topic with my friend Ember from Boston, and she described it with a phrase that I had never heard before, but that I thought was an incredibly great encapsulation of the concept. She referred to this as the validation economy. All right, so what exactly is the validation economy, and why might it be a bad thing? Well, first up, let's define validation as I'm using it in this context. Let's move this into the sun, shall we? So I would define validation in this context as being a specific form of external positive reinforcement, and specifically, it functions as reassurance for something that we are anxious, insecure, or fearful about. Specifically, it's something that makes us feel good about ourselves when we are afraid that we are inadequate. Now, on the face of it, there is nothing wrong with receiving positive reinforcement, especially on things that we might need reassurance about, things that we're insecure about, or in moments when we're facing our fears. I think that it becomes a problem, though, when A, it is used as a form of compensation, and B, when it becomes institutionalized to the point where it shifts the fundamental relationship and social contract between the audience and the performer and or students and teacher. Part of what struck me as odd about the shift in lineups for galas as well as teaching lineups is that it effectively shifted things such that the student's job became to reassure the teacher that they'd done a good job, not that it was the teacher's job to show up and teach a good lesson. Likewise, it was the audience's job to show up and make the performer feel like that they had put on a really good performance rather than the performer actually working to put on a good performance. And this basically creates an ecosystem or social contract where it's kind of a you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours kind of situation, where it is assumed that you must always give somebody positive feedback regardless of how good a job that they did, in the expectation that they will then give you positive feedback when it's your turn to be on stage. And goodness, do people get really, really, really upset when this social contract is broken. So this is just a quick note from Drex from the Future. After I completed the video, I realized it might be a good idea to go back and have a little section where I talk a little bit about the fact that it does feel good to be selected to teach or perform at a festival. You know, feeling seen in that way, it absolutely feels dynamite, and I have empathy for that. I totally understand why people rush to fill in those slots and how good it feels to feel seen. And you know, I get that it sucks having somebody tell you that something that makes you feel good is bad. And for what it's worth, I don't want you to feel as though I'm saying you're a bad person for accepting validation as payment, but I do want you to maybe take a little bit more time to consider what the ramifications are of that action that feels so good in the moment, and what the long term is and the impact that that has on other people. So here are a few of the ways that I have seen this manifest over the years. One of the ways that I've personally seen this manifest with my own work is in reactions to the Poi Top 10 list. Whether it be people demanding that I expand it out to a total of 20 slots instead of 10, which it did not escape my attention that a lot of the people asking for it to expand to 20 slots were the people that would have been featured in it if there were 20 slots. But there was also a certain level on which people felt entitled to get time on my channel and being featured on my channel. And a lot of that felt like people thinking that as they had watched my content, it was now my job to highlight theirs. Drex from the Future once again, and I can't believe I forgot to bring this up too, but one of the other ways that this manifests is in sponsorships. Plenty of people are willing to call themselves sponsored and basically give endless amounts of free advertising to companies that produce props for literally no other reason than having the label of sponsor makes them feel really special. And of course, there's the example that Ember brought up when she first shared the term validation economy with me, which is the example of undercutting in professional circumstances. A lot of people just want to feel seen so badly that they will accept any amount of compensation or none at all in order to participate in a lot of events or music festivals. And this means that for the people that have devoted their time and energy to doing it on a professional level, they're getting undercut. And I know a lot of people are going to tell me, you know, hey, I'd be going to the festival anyway, it doesn't really matter. And yeah, it does actually matter, friend. It matters for the person that you are taking food out of their mouth. But I think that the negative consequences of this aren't just confined to these examples. For one thing, when we create this ecosystem that is specifically built around creating social contracts in which positive reinforcement is not just given but assumed, it basically creates a gigantic neon sign welcoming narcissists and abusers into this community, because they can be sure that they will receive the endless amounts of admiration that they require. We've already seen in past years how this has already become a big problem, and I don't think that the two things are unrelated at all. This winds up making people in our community less safe. Number two, it makes it more difficult to earn a living in this community. If validation is the primary means by which people are compensated by contributing to it, guess what? All of us eventually have to pay our rent or go shopping for groceries. We cannot eat other people's admiration. And when there's an enormous pool of people that will accept validation as their primary form of compensation, it puts an enormous amount of downward pressure on actual wages, on the amounts that festivals are willing to pay for teachers and performers. And that makes our lives harder. And finally, perhaps the biggest problem with using validation as compensation is that it spectacularly fails at the entire point of using it in this fashion to begin with. The whole reason we want to be generous with our positive reinforcement and validation is that so many of us are coming into the flow arts full of insecurity and fear, and we want to assuage that. The problem is that the long-term solution to that isn't to receive a lot of external validation. It's for people to learn how to validate themselves. It's for people to learn how to like themselves. And when they become dependent on external validation, it actually gets in the way of being able to perform that function for themselves. Paradoxically, the real goal here is personal growth. And when we externalize our need for that validation, it actually prevents the growth rather than encourages it. And I do want to take one moment just to be abundantly clear. I am not saying that we should stop giving people positive reinforcement. I am not saying that we should stop telling our friends they're doing a good job. We can and should be generous with our praise, both to our friends as well as to the people that inspire us. It is a good thing to tell people good things about themselves. It just cannot be an assumed or given part of how that economy works. Okay, so obvious questions. What can we do about it? Number one, I think we need to be more honest in our feedback. And to clarify, a lot of people who say that they favor honest feedback really just favor not having to limit their cruelty. This is not a license to go be cruel to people. It is a license to admit to yourself, hey, I didn't see anything that inspired me in that gala, or I didn't really learn anything in this instructor's class. It's okay to admit that to ourselves, and it's okay to say, hey, I think that this experience could have been better, and I'm not afraid to say it. Number two, every single instructor and every single performer, and for that matter, every single staff member at these events need to insist that they're actually being fairly compensated for the work that they're providing for the event. We should not be looking at flow festivals as a place where people go to get experience teaching. They should be doing that in their own communities and taking what they are learning from teaching others to the flow festivals. The flow festivals should be places where we bring the best of the best. We should not be bringing in people that have no experience in the things that they're being hired out to do there. And number three, I think that it is not just important but absolutely necessary that we call out events and institutions that specifically exploit the people that work for them in this fashion. Look, nobody likes getting called out. It brings up lots of feelings of shame. It's really embarrassing. But at the same time, if we're going to create events and institutions that are designed to be a benefit to the community, then we have to accept feedback from that community of those moments when we fall short. Otherwise, quite frankly, the institutions themselves are building up their own sense of self around that validation economy. And that just becomes this weird snake eating its own tail that I barely know how to unpack right now. So, long story short, support your friends, tell them when they do a good job, and also tell them when they can improve on things. And do so with kindness. Because ultimately, the whole point of this is not to make yourself feel better by telling somebody else the ways that they can improve. It's to get that friend or that institution to a place where they're doing a better job at what they're doing so that all of us have a better time of it. We all love to feel seen. It feels good to be selected to teach or perform at a festival. It feels good to be on the lineup for a music festival. I'm not denying that. But at the same time, we have to think about the broader context of how that works. It cannot be just about how good we feel in that moment. But what do you think? Am I being unfair in my assessment here? Am I being too far-reaching in how I'm describing this problem? Or is this also a problem that you've noticed but didn't have a word to put to it? Let me know down in the comments. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to keep the conversation going, as well as to help my channel grow. This video would not be possible without the kind support of all of these nice people right here. These are my Flow patrons over on Patreon. They and the people listed down in the description help to make this video and all the videos on this channel possible. Thank you one and all for your very generous support. And if you watching right now are not currently a supporter, but you'd like to become one, you can do that by heading on over to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and signing up. There you can get access to a whole host of awesome rewards, but even more important, you'll be supporting me in my mission to create more videos like this one and share poi spinning and flow arts with the whole wide world. Go check that out, please and thank you. If you would like to check out some other videos I've done on flow arts culture, both the positives and the negatives, I will go ahead and leave a link to a playlist of those videos down in the description as well as up here on screen if you are watching on YouTube. Also, the YouTube algorithm thinks that you might like this top video here because it's very popular amongst viewers of my channel, so maybe give that a look as well. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to get out to flow today, and I'll see you with a new video real soon. Peace.